There is a moment in the early texts when a young man named Melanchthoputta comes to the Buddha with a list of questions. He wants to know whether the universe is eternal or not eternal, whether it is finite or infinite, whether the soul and body are the same or different. He tells the Buddha he will not continue practicing unless these questions are answered first. He stands there, waiting, caught between moving forward and turning back. The Buddha does not answer the questions. Instead, he tells a story about a man struck by a poisoned arrow. Before allowing the arrow to be removed, the man demands to know who shot it, what family they came from, whether they were tall or short, what kind of wood the arrow was made from, what type of feathers were used. The Buddha asks Melanchthoputta directly, would that man survive? And Melanchthoputta says no, the man would die before receiving answers. Doubt is like this. It can hold us so completely that we forget the arrow is still there. You may know this feeling. You sit down to practice and immediately the questions arrive. Is this the right technique? Should you be following the breath or noting thoughts? Is mindfulness even what you need, or should you be doing something else entirely? You read one teacher who says to let everything be, and another who says to investigate closely, and you are left standing in the middle, unable to move in either direction. The paralysis is not dramatic, it is quiet. It is the slow leak of confidence, the sense that you cannot trust your own experience, because you have not yet found the perfect map. Think of doubt as fog settling over a familiar path. The path is still there beneath your feet. The ground has not disappeared, but the fog makes everything uncertain. You can see only a few steps ahead. You begin to question whether this is even the right path, whether you should have turned left at the last fork, whether you are wasting time. The fog does not argue with you. It simply obscures, and in that obscurity, the mind begins to produce stories about what might be hidden just beyond sight. What the Buddha understood is that doubt often disguises itself as reasonable inquiry. It presents itself as the voice of discernment, of careful thought, and sometimes it is. But more often, it is the mind's way of avoiding direct experience. It is easier to think about whether you are doing it right than to actually feel the breath. It is easier to compare methods than to notice the tightness in your chest. Doubt keeps you in your head, where everything can be endlessly reconsidered, rather than in your body, where things are simply happening. You can notice this right now. As you listen, there may be a small voice asking whether this is worth your time, whether you should be listening to something else, whether these words are true or just another opinion in a sea of opinions. That voice is not your enemy. It is not a flaw in your practice. It is simply doubt doing what doubt does. It is fog settling. The teaching here is not to fight the fog or to pretend it is not there. The teaching is to notice that even in fog, you can still take one step. You can still feel your foot meet the ground. You can still hear the sound of your own breath. The path does not require perfect visibility. It only requires your willingness to move, even when you cannot see far ahead. Melanchthoputta wanted certainty before he would practice. He wanted the entire map revealed before taking a single step. But the Buddha's response was clear: the practice is the removal of the arrow. The questions about the nature of the universe, the metaphysics, the grand theories, these can wait. What cannot wait is your suffering and your capacity to meet it directly. This does not mean that all questions are useless. It means that some questions are asked from a place of genuine curiosity, and some are asked from a place of fear. Doubt, the kind that paralyzes, is almost always rooted in fear. Fear that you will waste your time. Fear that you will do it wrong. Fear that you are not capable of discernment. And so the mind produces question after question, not to find answers, but to delay the moment when you must actually trust something. What you are invited to trust is not a belief system or authority figure. You are invited to trust your own capacity to observe, to notice when the body is tense, to notice when the mind is spinning, to notice when doubt itself has become a familiar companion, a way of feeling safe by never fully committing. The fog may not lift immediately, but you can still walk. You can still place one foot in front of the other. And in that simple movement, something begins to clarify, not because you have answered all the questions, but because you have stopped waiting for permission to begin. There is a particular kind of stillness that comes not from rest, but from being caught. You stand at a crossroads. Every path seems equally uncertain. One direction whispers of safety but feels small. Another calls to something in you, but the ground beneath it feels unmarked. A third was chosen long ago by someone else, and you inherited it without ever deciding. So you remain where you are, waiting for certainty that does not arrive. This is doubt. Not the small questioning that sharpens thought. Not the healthy skepticism that tests an idea. This is the doubt that freezes you. The doubt that whispers you cannot trust what you know. You cannot trust what you feel. You cannot trust the people who guide you. You cannot even trust yourself to choose well. So better to choose nothing. Better to wait. A bird perches on a branch at the edge of a cliff. The wind moves in every direction at once. From the north it carries the scent of open sky. From the east it brings the memory of the nest. From the west it carries the sound of other birds calling, already in flight. The bird feels each current separately. Each one seems true. Each one seems to promise something. And so the bird does not move. Its feet grip the branch. Its wings remain folded. The wind continues to shift, and the bird continues to wait. When doubt arrives in your body, it often feels like this, not like a thought, but like a force pressing from all sides. Your chest tightens slightly. Your breath becomes shallow. There is a heaviness in your limbs, as if movement itself requires a permission you do not have. You may notice your mind cycling through the same questions again and again, finding no rest. This is not a flaw. This is what doubt feels like when it has taken hold. The Buddha once spoke to his followers about belief. He did not say, "Believe in me." He did not say, "Trust the teachings because they are ancient or because I have spoken them." Instead, he said something quieter and more challenging. Do not believe something simply because you have heard it. Do not believe it because it is written in a text. Do not believe it because a teacher has told you it is true. Test it. Bring it into your own life. See if it holds when you live it. This is not permission to doubt everything into paralysis. It is an invitation to a different kind of trust. Not blind trust. Not the trust that surrenders your own seeing, but the trust that comes from direct experience. From noticing what actually happens when you live in a certain way, from feeling the consequences in your own body and mind. The difficulty is this doubt often prevents you from testing anything at all. It whispers that the test itself is unreliable, that your own experience cannot be trusted because you are biased or confused, or not wise enough to interpret what you perceive. And so you remain suspended. The bird does not leap into the wind because the wind itself seems untrustworthy. But notice what happens if you shift your attention slightly. Instead of asking, "Which direction should I go?" you might ask, "What is actually here right now?" The bird on the branch is not in danger at this moment. The wind is moving, yes. The uncertainty is real, yes. But in this breath, the bird is safe. The branch holds. The body is intact. This is not a solution to doubt. It is a pause within it. When you bring your attention to direct experience, to what you can actually perceive without interpretation, something subtle begins to shift. You may still feel uncertain about the future. You may still not know which choice to make. But you begin to separate the uncertainty about what comes next from the solidity of what is present now. These are not the same thing. The bird on the branch could spend its whole life waiting for a wind that blows in only one direction. That wind will never come. Wind by its nature moves. Uncertainty by its nature is part of being alive. But the bird itself is not uncertainty. The branch is not uncertainty. The body in this moment is not uncertain. It is here. This is where the practice becomes simple. Not because it solves doubt, but because it gives you something actual to do with it. When doubt arises, and it will today and tomorrow and in the days that follow, notice it. Feel where it lives in your body. Is it in your chest, your belly, your throat? Does it have a temperature, a texture, a weight? You need not do anything with this noticing. You need not try to change it or make it go away. Simply name it, quietly, as it arises. This is doubt. This is what doubt feels like in me right now. The naming itself is a form of testing, not testing whether doubt is right or wrong, but testing what happens when you meet it directly, without the added layer of judging yourself for having it. When you stop treating doubt as an enemy to be defeated and instead meet it as an experience arising in your body, something changes. Not everything, not the uncertainty itself, but your relationship to it becomes less tight, less paralyzing. The bird does not need to solve the question of which direction to fly before it can feel the branch beneath its feet. It does not need certainty about the future before it can notice the present. And neither do you. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from searching too hard for something that cannot be held. You know this exhaustion. It arrives when you are trying to decide which voice to trust, which path to follow, which belief will finally make sense of things. The searching itself becomes the burden. Doubt is often described as an obstacle, but it is worth looking at what doubt actually is, rather than treating it as something to overcome. Doubt is the mind's honest response to uncertainty. The world offers no final answers. Every choice contains unknowns. Every belief, when examined closely, rests on assumptions that cannot be proven. This is not a flaw in your thinking. This is how things are. Yet there is something the mind does with this uncertainty. It does not simply rest in not knowing. Instead, it begins to search for certainty. It reaches for a view, a belief, a framework that will eliminate the not knowing. And here is where the exhaustion begins. Because the tighter you grasp at certainty, the more it dissolves. Clinging to views is like grasping at water. The harder you squeeze your fist, the less remains in your hand. Think of trying to build a house on the surface of a river. You gather your materials. You lay your foundation. But the water moves. The surface shifts. So you build faster, reinforce more, hold tighter. The house never settles. The foundation never holds. And the effort of maintaining this impossible structure becomes your whole life. This is what happens when you crave certainty in a world that is, by its nature, uncertain. You are not trying to understand the river. You are trying to make the river stop moving. The Buddha pointed to this pattern very directly. He taught that much of our suffering comes from craving, from the constant reaching for things to be a certain way, and doubt is often a form of craving. You crave the certainty that will tell you what to do, who to trust, what to believe. You crave the solid ground that never appears. The craving itself is the problem, not the doubt. When doubt appears, most people do one of two things. They either grasp harder at a belief, hoping that conviction will substitute for certainty, or they swing to the opposite. They reject all beliefs, all views, all guidance. Both movements come from the same impulse, the desire to escape the discomfort of not knowing. But there is a third possibility. It is to notice what is happening in the moment doubt arises. Not to fight the doubt, not to convince yourself of something, simply to observe what the mind is doing. When doubt appears, there is often a subtle tension in the body, a tightness in the chest or the belly, a sense of reaching, of grasping. The mind is trying to grab something solid, and as long as the grasping continues, doubt will persist, because the grasping is itself the doubt. This is where the practice becomes quiet and simple. When doubt appears, you can ask yourself gently, without urgency, what am I trying to make permanent? What am I trying to hold on to that keeps slipping away? You might notice that you are trying to make a relationship permanent, when relationships are always changing. You might notice that you are trying to make a belief permanent, when understanding itself evolves. You might notice that you are trying to make yourself permanent, when the self is constantly shifting. The question itself does not demand an answer. It simply turns the attention inward, toward the grasping itself, rather than toward the object being grasped. When you look directly at the grasping, something begins to shift. You see that the certainty you are reaching for is not actually available. Not because you have not searched hard enough, but because certainty of that kind does not exist. The river does not stop moving. It has never stopped moving. And the moment you release the effort to make it stop, you can actually see the river. You can work with it. You can navigate it. But only when you stop trying to freeze it in place. This does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means recognizing that trust does not come from certainty. You can act in the world, make choices, follow a path, without needing to know in advance that it is the right one. In fact, this is the only way to actually move forward. The paralysis comes from waiting for certainty that will never arrive. When doubt appears again, and it will, you might notice something different. You might see that the doubt itself is not the problem. The problem is the craving for certainty that the doubt has exposed. The doubt is simply showing you where you are still trying to build a house on water. And in that seeing, something quiets. Not because you have solved anything, but because you have stopped fighting the river. You have stopped demanding that it be something other than what it is. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes not from pain itself, but from not knowing which voice to trust. Inside you, right now, there are many voices. One says you should take a different path. Another says you are on the right path and should not doubt. A third whispers that both are wrong, that you do not know enough to choose anything. They speak with different certainties. They contradict each other, and in the space between them, you are suspended. This is doubt, not the small, healthy doubt that checks before you leap. This is the kind that freezes you. It makes you turn your head from side to side, listening for a sound that is clearer than the others. It makes you read one book, then another, hoping the next one will settle the matter. It makes you ask more people, gather more information, wait for a sign that never quite arrives. The problem is not that doubt exists. Doubt is natural. The problem is that you are looking for certainty in the wrong place. You are looking for it outside yourself, in the words of others, in the logic of arguments, in the weight of evidence. And while you are looking outward, the mind itself remains disturbed. It is like a pond into which many stones have been thrown. The water churns. Ripples cross over ripples. And because the surface is in motion, you cannot see the bottom, even though the bottom is still there, unchanged. When the mind is full of competing voices, each one demanding that you choose, the natural response is to listen harder, to think more, to gather more reasons and more support for one side or the other. But this only adds more stones to the pond, more ripples, more disturbance. What becomes possible instead is something quieter. It is not that answers arrive like lightning, sudden and undeniable. It is that when the mind settles, the questions themselves begin to lose their grip, not because they are answered, but because the urgency around them fades. The way becomes clear not because you have found the right words, but because you have stopped thrashing in the water. This is what the old teachers meant when they spoke of clarity arising from stillness. They were not speaking of some mystical revelation. They were speaking of what happens when you stop adding to the disturbance, when you let the mind be, without trying to fix it or convince it or resolve it. The bottom does not become visible because you have dived deeper or looked harder. It becomes visible because the water has stopped moving. There is something in you that already knows this. You have felt it, perhaps in moments when you stopped trying. When you were so tired of thinking about something that you simply let it go for an afternoon. And in that space of not thinking, something became clear. Not because you found new information, but because the constant motion of doubt had stilled. Doubt thrives on motion. It feeds on the back and forth between options. The more you turn your head from side to side, the more real the conflict becomes. The more you argue with yourself, the louder all the voices grow. It is as if each time you ask the question again, you throw another stone into the pond. What if, instead, you were to sit with the not knowing itself? Not to try to resolve it, not to pick a side, but simply to be present with the fact that, right now, you do not know. To notice how that feels in your body. To watch what happens when you do not immediately move to fill the silence with more thinking. This is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is the opposite. It is giving the mind the one thing it actually needs a chance to settle. The practice is simple. It requires nothing but time and a willingness to be still. Sit for 5 minutes. It does not need to be longer. 5 minutes is enough. Sit and breathe. Let your attention rest on the breath, the way it moves in and out. And as you do, thoughts will come. Doubts will come. Competing voices will speak. You do not need to argue with them or choose between them. You do not need to make them go away. Simply notice them, the way you might notice clouds passing across the sky, and return your attention to the breath. You are not trying to achieve anything. You are not trying to reach a state of perfect clarity or perfect peace. You are simply creating a space where the mind can be without the constant pressure to decide, where it can rest. As you sit, something shifts, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but gradually. You may notice that the urgency of the doubt begins to soften. Not because it has been answered, but because the disturbance has had a chance to settle. The ripples on the surface of the pond begin to fade. And as they do, something becomes visible that was always there beneath the motion. Not answers, but a kind of knowing that does not require words. A sense of the ground beneath your feet. A sense that you can move, even without certainty. even without all the voices agreeing. This is the gift of silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of space. Space where doubt can exist without dominating. Space where the way becomes clear not because the questions have been solved, but because the silence itself has become enough. There is a particular kind of suffering that arrives when you stand at a crossroads and cannot move. Not because the path is blocked, but because you cannot trust what you know. Your mind spins with reasons and counter-reasons. You wait for certainty to arrive like a letter in the mail. And while you wait, something in you already understands the answer. You simply cannot hear it over the noise of your own doubt. This is the paralysis of not knowing what to trust. It is different from simple confusion. Confusion is honest. It says, I do not have enough information. But doubt is something else. Doubt says, I have information, but I cannot believe it. I cannot believe my own sensing. I cannot trust what my body already knows. When a tree stands in a storm, its roots do not deliberate. They do not wait for the tree's branches to think through the physics of wind resistance. The roots feel the pull and push of the earth. They know, without calculation, which way to hold. The tree bends, it does not snap. Not because it reasoned its way to flexibility, but because the whole organism, roots, trunk, branches, leaves, already knew how to respond. The wisdom was not in thought alone. It was in the entire being, responding to what was actually happening. You carry this same capacity, but somewhere along the way, you learn to trust your thinking mind more than you trust the rest of yourself. You learn that clarity must come through words, through logical steps, through the kind of knowing that can be explained. And so when your body feels something true, but your mind cannot quite articulate it, you dismiss the feeling as unreliable. You wait. You think harder. You gather more reasons. And the answer you already sensed grows fainter, buried under the weight of deliberation. The teaching in the Mahayana tradition points to something that early Buddhism also knew. Wisdom is not found in thought alone. The whole being knows the way, not just your prefrontal cortex, not just your ability to string words together. Your whole being, your nervous system, your intuition, your somatic sense of what is true, carries knowledge that your thinking mind has not yet translated into language. This is not mysticism. This is how you actually work. When you walk into a room, you sense the atmosphere before you think about it. When you meet someone, your body knows something about their trustworthiness before your mind has formed an opinion. When you are about to make a choice, there is often a felt sense, a tightness or an openness that arrives before your reasoning catches up. These are not errors. They are not wishful thinking. They are direct knowing, happening at a level that is older and often wiser than your verbal mind. But doubt makes you discount this. Doubt says, that feeling is not reliable. I need to think it through. I need to be sure. I need proof. And so you keep thinking. You keep waiting. You keep your hand off the doorknob because you have not yet achieved the kind of certainty that only exists in thought. The cost of this waiting is real. It is not just discomfort. It is a kind of disconnection from yourself. You become a person who does not trust their own organism. You become someone who has learned to override the signals that are constantly being sent to you from your whole being. And the more you do this, the fainter those signals become. The body learns that no one is listening. It learns to be quiet. What if you turned toward this differently? Not by abandoning your thinking mind, but by including the rest of yourself in the knowing process. What if you asked your whole being, not just your thoughts, what is true here, There is a simple way to begin this. It requires nothing but your attention and your willingness to notice what is actually present. The next time you find yourself caught in doubt, unable to move forward because you cannot trust what you sense, place one hand on your chest, not as a gesture of sincerity, though it may feel sincere, but as a way of anchoring your attention to the part of you that knows without words. Then ask yourself a question, not a big one, something simple and concrete, something you have been uncertain about. Ask it gently. Ask it as though you are asking a trusted friend, not interrogating a suspect. And then wait, not for your mind to produce an answer, but for your body to respond. What you are looking for is not a voice. It is a sensation, a quality of feeling. When you ask the question while your hand rests on your chest, notice what happens. Does your chest feel open or tight? Does your breath deepen or shallow? Does something in your body relax or tense? These are not random reactions. These are your organism's way of knowing. This is your roots responding to the ground beneath you. The difference between mental chatter and bodily knowing is not hard to distinguish once you turn your attention toward it. Mental chatter is often circular. It repeats. It argues with itself. It sounds like you, in your own voice, thinking the same thoughts over again. Bodily knowing is different. It arrives. It has a quality of simplicity. It does not need to convince you. It simply is, a tightness, an ease, a yes or a no that lives in your flesh, not in your words. As you practice this, as you place your hand on your chest and listen to what your body already knows, something begins to shift. The paralysis does not disappear all at once, but you begin to distinguish between the doubt that comes from genuine uncertainty and the doubt that comes from not trusting yourself. You begin to hear the difference between a question that still needs time and an answer that has already arrived, waiting for you to acknowledge it. There is a particular kind of stillness that comes from doubt. Not the stillness of rest, but the stillness of someone standing at a threshold, unable to cross. You know the feeling. You are waiting for certainty before you move. You want to see the whole path laid out before your feet touch the ground. You want to know where the road leads. What will happen when you take the first step, whether this choice will be the right one. And so you wait. You gather more information. You ask more questions. You listen to the voices of people who have walked before you, hoping they will tell you something that settles the not knowing. But the not knowing does not settle. It only deepens, because the more you look for certainty, the more you see how many ways things could unfold, how many variables you cannot control, how much you simply cannot know in advance. This is the paralysis of doubt. Not doubt as a useful questioning, but doubt as a refusal to move until the ground is completely solid, until the destination is completely clear. It is the belief that you must understand the whole journey before taking even one step. There is something almost reasonable about this. In our lives, we are taught to plan, to think ahead, to gather information before deciding, and these things have their place. But somewhere along the way, this reasonable caution can harden into something else. It becomes a demand for impossible certainty. It becomes a condition you place on yourself. I will not move until I know. And because you can never fully know, you do not move. The Zen tradition has a different way of speaking about this. It says, the path appears beneath your feet. Walk first, then see. Not walk blindly, not walk recklessly, but walk. Begin. Let the movement itself be the teacher. Let the first step show you what the second step might be. This is not a command. It is an observation about how understanding actually works. when you are sitting in a room, you do not need to understand the entire architecture of the building before you stand up and walk to the door. You simply stand, you walk. The door appears, you open it. The hallway reveals itself. Each action brings new information, new clarity. The path does not exist complete and waiting in your mind before you move. It exists in the meeting between your movement and the world around you. Think of a lantern that lights only the next few steps of a dark road. It does not illuminate the whole journey. It cannot show you where the road ends or what lies beyond the next bend. But it shows you enough. It shows you the ground directly in front of you. It shows you where to place your foot next. And when you take that step, the light moves with you. New ground appears. You see a little further. Then you walk again. The lantern does not give you the certainty of seeing the entire road at once. But it gives you something more useful. It gives you the next step. This is how life actually moves. Not in grand, perfectly planned arcs, but in small increments. In choices made with incomplete information. In actions taken despite uncertainty. And here is what often surprises people. The clarity you are waiting for does not come before the movement. It comes through the movement. It comes from doing, from trying, from stepping forward, even when you cannot see the whole way. Your doubt tells you that this is not safe. Your doubt says wait until you know. But notice what happens when you wait. Time passes. Opportunities shift. The world changes around you while you stand still, hoping for certainty that will never fully come. The cost of waiting for complete knowledge is very high. It is the cost of your own life, unfolding in stillness. There is a different way to meet doubt. Not by forcing certainty where none exists. Not by pretending you know more than you do. But by accepting that you can move even when you do not know. You can take a step even when you cannot see the whole road. You can make a choice even when the outcome is uncertain. And something shifts when you do this. The lantern begins to move. The path begins to appear. This is not recklessness. It is not the abandonment of thought. It is the recognition that some kinds of knowing can only happen through action. Some truths can only be discovered by moving. Some doors can only be opened by walking toward them. The information you are waiting for may not come while you are standing still. It may only come once you have begun. What would it feel like to choose one small thing today without needing to know where it leads? Not something large or life-changing. Something small. Something you have been hesitating about. A conversation you have been putting off. A project you have been thinking about starting. A direction you have been curious about but afraid to explore because you could not see the whole destination. What if you simply chose it? What if you took one step without the map, without the guarantee, without the complete picture? Notice what happens. Notice whether the world actually collapses when you move without total certainty. Notice whether the next step becomes clearer once you have taken the first one. Notice whether understanding grows from the movement itself rather than preceding it. This is not a test you are passing or failing. It is simply an observation, a direct meeting with how knowledge actually arrives in a life. There is a quality of mind that arrives when you do not know what to believe. You feel it sometimes in the body first. A tightness in the chest, a slight contraction. The mind wants certainty. It wants to know which way to turn, what to trust, how to proceed. And when that knowing does not come, something in you resists. You may call it doubt. You may feel it as paralysis. But doubt itself is not the problem. Consider what doubt actually is. It is the mind meeting its own edge. It is awareness bumping against the limit of what it can grasp. When you doubt, you are not broken. You are awake to something true that you do not, in fact, know. And this knowing is not a failure. It is the most honest place your mind can stand. We have been taught to treat doubt as an enemy, an obstacle, something to overcome, to push past, to resolve as quickly as possible. So when doubt arrives, about a decision, about a belief, about what is real, the instinct is to clench, to grip, to demand that the mind produce certainty on command. And in that gripping, something closes. The very openness that would allow wisdom to move becomes rigid. The Buddha spoke of this space differently. He did not say doubt is weakness. He said the willingness to not know is where wisdom can breathe. There is a profound intimacy in genuine not knowing. It is not the blankness of ignorance. It is the clarity of meeting reality as it actually is, rather than as you wish it to be. Think of the sky. The sky holds both clouds and clear air without preference. When clouds gather, the sky does not resist them. When they clear, the sky does not cling to the clarity. It simply holds both. There is no struggle in the sky. There is no demand that the weather conform to what the sky wants. And because of this equanimity, this balanced, open presence, the sky remains itself, vast, unchanged, able to hold whatever weather moves through. Your mind can meet doubt the same way, not by forcing certainty, not by choosing a belief simply because the uncertainty feels uncomfortable, but by allowing doubt to exist in the space of your awareness without collapsing into it or fighting it away. When doubt is present, what you are actually experiencing is a gap, a place where the mind cannot yet see clearly. And gaps are not empty. They are full of possibility. They are the space where something new can form, where understanding can ripen, where you might discover something you could not have grasped if you had clung to a premature certainty. This is why the impulse to resolve doubt quickly is often the impulse that keeps you stuck. You want relief from the discomfort of not knowing, so you grab the nearest belief, any belief, that will make the feeling go away. You do not wait. You do not let the mind settle. You do not give wisdom room to move. But what if tonight, when doubt arises, you did something different? What if, instead of treating it as a problem to solve, you simply acknowledged it? Not with resignation, not with defeat, but with a kind of quiet recognition. The recognition that you are meeting the actual limits of your knowledge in this moment. That this is not shameful. That this is where honesty begins. There is a whisper that can help, not a command, not an affirmation meant to override what you actually feel, but a gentle acknowledgement that you can return to when the mind is spinning in uncertainty. When doubt is present, and the instinct to resolve it is strong, you can whisper to yourself, "I do not know." And that is enough for now. Notice what happens when you say this, not as defeat, but as truth. The mind may not relax immediately, but something shifts. The clenching may ease slightly. The demand that you figure everything out right now may soften. You are no longer fighting the doubt. You are no longer demanding that your mind be other than it is. And in that small opening, that tiny release of the grip, something becomes possible. Not answers necessarily, but space. Room for clarity to arrive in its own time, without your interference. The same way the sky does not have to do anything to hold both clouds and clear air. It simply remains open. Doubt is not the absence of wisdom. It is often wisdom's first whisper. The whisper that says, you do not yet see the whole picture. You are meeting something larger than your current understanding. Stay present. Stay open. Do not rush to close this gap with borrowed certainty. The equanimity that the Buddha pointed toward is not indifference. It is not apathy. It is the capacity to meet what is true, including not knowing, without the urgency to change it. It is the mind resting in its own clarity, even when clarity means seeing that you do not yet know. As you rest tonight, if doubt moves through your awareness, let it move. Do not push it away. Do not grab at it. Simply notice it, the way the sky notices clouds, and when the impulse to resolve it arises, you can return to that whisper, "I do not know," and that is enough for now. Let the mind settle into that truth. Let your body relax into the permission to not have all the answers. This is where you can actually meet yourself. This is where wisdom waits. The mind that doubts is not broken. It is simply awake to the fact that certainty is rare, and that most of what we call knowing is actually guessing dressed in familiar clothes. When you sit with doubt long enough, you begin to see that it is not the opposite of faith. It is the honest acknowledgement that you are standing in a place where the ground has not yet revealed itself. This does not mean you are lost. It means you have stopped pretending to know what you do not know. And that stopping, uncomfortable as it is where clarity begins. There is a difference between doubt that questions and doubt that clings. The first is spacious. It asks, it listens, it remains open. The second is tight. It circles the same question endlessly, not because it seeks an answer, but because it fears what the answer might require. When doubt becomes paralysis, it is usually because we are demanding a guarantee before we take a single step. But the path does not offer guarantees. It offers only the next breath, the next moment, the next choice made with whatever light is available. You do not need to resolve all doubt before you begin. You only need to see it clearly, to recognize when it is protecting you from real harm, and when it is protecting you from aliveness itself. The mind will always generate questions. That is its nature. But you are not obligated to treat every question as though it must be answered before you can move. Sometimes the most honest response to doubt is simply to notice it, to let it exist without letting it decide everything. You can hold doubt in one hand and still take a step with the other. You can say, "I do not know," and also, "I will try this and see what happens." The two are not in conflict. They are both true at the same time. What you are learning, slowly, is that trust is not the absence of doubt. Trust is the willingness to move even when doubt is present. It is not blind. It is not reckless. It is simply the recognition that waiting for absolute certainty is another way of never beginning. And life, with all its uncertainty, continues whether you are ready or not. The breath does not wait for you to trust it. It moves. The body does not ask permission to feel. It feels. And in that simple, ongoing movement, there is a kind of knowing that does not depend on concepts. It is not the knowing of answers. It is the knowing of presence, of being here, in this moment, with whatever is true right now. So let the questions remain if they need to remain. Let the uncertainty sit beside you, if that is what is real. But do not let them convince you that you are incapable of moving, of choosing, of living with some degree of openness and care. You are more capable than the doubting mind believes. Not because you have all the answers, but because you have learned to be with not knowing. And that is a different kind of strength. The practice now is very simple. Let the concepts fall away. Let the questions rest. Come back to the body. Feel the weight of it, the temperature of the air around you, the rise and fall of the chest. This is not an idea. This is not something you need to trust or doubt. It is simply what is happening. And in this moment, that is enough. Breathe in. breathe out. Let the mind settle like dust in still water. There is nothing you need to figure out right now, nothing you need to prove or resolve. Just this breath, just this body, just this moment, exactly as it is. If you would like to continue, there are other reflections waiting. But there is no hurry. You can stay here as long as you need. Let the stillness hold you. Let the breath carry you. And when you are ready, whatever comes next will be there. For now, just rest.